tamu dari luar yang alhamdulillah beliau adalah profesor dari Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya, Profesor Dr. Cheng Hwee Ming. Jadi beliau expert di fisiologi dan sekarang sudah honorary profesor, sudah mungkin honoris causa ya, sudah emeritus mungkin ya kalau di Indonesia. Dan wow, beliau S1, S3-nya semua di UK, di Liverpool University. Dan untuk administratif duty-nya, beliau pernah sebagai penguji eksternal untuk UPM program. Dan area ekspertisnya beliau di bidang fisiologi, medical dan health science, kemudian di clinical nutrition, sama di humoral immunologi. Buku-buku yang pernah beliau terbitkan tahun 2016 itu tentang Physiology Question Based Learning, Neurophysiology, Endocrine and Gastrointestinal System by Springer Press. Wow, keren. Cool, you are cool, Prof. And 2015 have Physiology Question Based Learning oleh Prof. Cheng Hwee Ming, dan 2014 Everything About Physiology. Yeah, so you have so much book about physiology. Wow, from 2098 until 2016. Okay, and now is your lucky day. You have him in here. So welcome, Professor Cheng Hwee Ming.
Yeah, thank you.
And now is your time.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I will also help you.
You will help me to share screen?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now is your time.
Okay, so we can have the first slide.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not see you. Okay. Okay, I see you now. Yes. Okay. Hello? You
Hello.
can see my first slide?
Not yet, no.
PowerPoint-nya belum dinyalakan.
Oh, PowerPoint-nya belum nyala ya?
Bisa.
I will stop first. Belum dinyalakan ya? Wait. Share screen again. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we can, you want to expand the slide? Oh, okay, that's great, yeah. Okay, I can start now?
Yes.
Okay, good to meet you all students who are listening to this class from Kuala Lumpur. So, I realized that I'm speaking to sports science students. So I decided to talk about a topic that I think will interest all of you. And obviously that is on skeletal muscle, okay, skeletal muscle. So the title I gave to Dr. Titin was on unmasking muscle physiology. So obviously there are three types of muscles in the body. You have the cardiac, you have the smooth, and you also have the skeletal muscle. So most of today's talk in a short while will focus on skeletal muscle because that is of direct interest for all of you as exercise physiologists and sports scientists. Yeah. So I've decided to use some of the words from the movie. I assume most of you young people will also follow this movie. So using the word marvel, basically how I hope to show how marvelous the skeletal muscle is, and the last movie was the end game, and to show you that the muscle cell has its own ability to actually sustain its own function during exercise and during physical activity. Yeah, so we will go through different aspect of skeletal muscle physiology, and I hope that at the end of this you will wonder and marvel at how wonderful your skeletal muscle is. Okay, next slide. So this is where I think first met your lecturer, Dr. Titin. She has a very long name, so obviously she shortened her name to Titin. Yeah, and this is together with my colleagues from India and Professor Robert Carroll, who is a book author. He has written a few physiology textbooks. And this was in Kobe last year, I think, in a physiology conference. So of course, this year, all conferences have been canceled. So we are not able to meet our colleagues. So we had a good time in Japan, in Kobe, and conference was organized near the cherry blossom season. So some of the lecturers had the chance to also enjoy the beautiful flowers. So next slide. Okay, so here is one of the basic cardiovascular equation. So I'll try to speak slowly because I realize that your lectures are all in bahasa Indonesia. So you may not be so familiar with the English word. But anyway, this is one of the basic cardiovascular equation describing the relationship between blood pressure, cardiac output, and total peripheral resistance. Now, under the cardiac output, obviously, we have the cardiac muscle. So this is obviously an important topic, the cardiac muscle. Now, under the total peripheral resistance, I've shown you a picture of the blood vessel. So this highlights the second type of muscle, which is important, which is important in cardiovascular physiology, and that is the smooth muscle. So cardiac muscle, and then smooth muscle, and obviously for today we want to look at. Yeah. So for today we want to. Sorry, there's some background. Somebody need to mute the mic. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. And so for today, we want to focus on skeletal muscle on the left here, and to see how during exercise, sports, or physical activity, the muscle has its own way to sustain its own blood flow, as well as fulfilling many other surprising functions that we are beginning to discover. So next slide. So this is the way in which I'll talk about today's talk, and this is under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different subheading, and we will look at contraction pump contributes to the increased cardiac output, okay, in a short while. But let me just go up to the top here and to remind all of us that during exercise or physical activity, the blood pressure is obviously increased. It has to increase, okay? So if you remember the equation in the previous slide, you have a BP equal to CO multiplied by TPR. So obviously the BP is increased either because of CO or because of TPR or because of both, okay? But in the case of exercise, we know that the total peripheral resistance is decreased because you have a lot of vasodilation in the skeletal muscle to increase blood flow. You also have a lot of vasodilation in the skin, cutaneous, in order to lose heat, to maintain body temperature, because your body becomes warmer during exercise. So the TPR is decreased. And so in order to sustain the increased BP, blood pressure, it must be because the cardiac output is alone is increased, okay? BP is CO times TPR. So the CO alone is the most important component or factor that maintains the blood pressure. Now coming down to skeletal muscle, the first point I want to make is that the contraction pump, now the contraction pump here refers to your skeletal muscle, because every time you exercise, you move your arm or your legs, the veins are compressed mechanically by your muscle. And so that helps to increase what we call the venous return of the blood volume back to the heart. And so because your cardiovascular system is a closed loop and blood volume is a fixed volume, if you have this skeletal muscle pump that compress the vein and brings back more blood into the heart, you also pump out more blood, okay? So this one is sometimes called Starling's Law of the Heart. Are you all familiar with that? Starling, Ernest Starling, the key physiologist that describes how if you fill the heart with more blood, it will also pump out more blood. So this is the first point, that the function of the skeletal muscle, as it contracts your muscle, it is also compressing your veins to increase the venous return, and that contributes to the increased cardiac output, which is important to sustain the increased blood pressure. Okay. Now the second point is very interesting, because obviously we know that there is vasodilation in the skeletal muscle. Okay. And now what happens is that as the muscle becomes more active, it will also release chemical into the tissue. And for example, one of the chemical that it releases is carbon dioxide, or the pH of the skeletal muscle is more acidic, and so on. Now, all the metabolites that you find in the muscle during exercise, they all vasodilate the blood vessel. So it makes a lot of sense. So the more active you are, the more the muscles will release vasodilator metabolite, and that increases vasodilation and increases the perfusion. Perfusion just means the blood flow. Okay, so this is the second point, and we will go through the next few points in this order. Let me have the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is the first point. Skeletal muscle contraction pump contributes to the increased cardiac output. And as I mentioned to you, so as the skeletal muscle contracts, you pump more blood back to the heart, and then the blood will also, since it is greater amount in the ventricles, it will also be stretched more and pump out more blood. So this is like a self-sustaining way in which the skeletal muscle pump also sustain cardiac output. And this is described by this person here, and you remember the name. It's called Starling's Law of the Heart. His full name is Ernest Starling. Okay, Ernest is his first name. Now, the next slide is what I've already explained. Next slide. The next slide, the top sentence here: skeletal muscle metabolism produces a lot of metabolites that leads to vasodilation and increased perfusion. So it makes a lot of sense, isn't it? As you are exercising, your muscles produce metabolites, and the same metabolite increases the blood flow to the muscle. So it is a beautiful design by creation or by design okay, so which sustains the increased blood flow. So all, this is not a coincidence if you believe in creation, all local parameter changes and muscle metabolites are vasodilators. So you can think of carbon dioxide here, which is released during exercise, it vasodilates. You can think of the low pH, which also vasodilate. You can even think of the slight increase in potassium in the muscle during exercise, and that also causes relaxation of the smooth muscle, and that also produce vasodilation. So these are the first two interesting, marvelous physiology of the skeletal muscle. The third one, sorry, next slide. Okay, now have you? I think most of you would recognize this graph as the hemoglobin oxygen saturation graph. Okay, now this shows you that this sigma shape of the hemoglobin oxygen, that there are certain factors that will cause the hemoglobin to release more oxygen to the muscle when it is exercising. And some of these factors include a low pH, increased CO2, and increased temperature. So if you think about when you're exercising, what happens to your muscle? It is warmer, right? Increased temperature. What happens to the CO2 in your muscle? It is also higher, right? Increased CO2. What happens to the pH in your muscle tissue? It is also a little bit more acidic. And so this shows you that the decrease in pH, the increase in the CO2, and the warmer muscle will tend to shift this hemoglobin oxygen curve to the right. I assume that you've done this in your physiology, but even if you haven't, so the point I'm trying to make here is that changes in the muscle, decreased pH, increased CO2, or the increased temperature, all of it will tend to help to unload more oxygen from the hemoglobin to the muscle. So it makes sense, isn't it? So as you have all these parameters changing in the muscle, it helps to dissociate, causes the hemoglobin to release more oxygen to the cell. So this effect by pH and CO2 actually is called after somebody's name. So this is the picture of that physiologist that you need to give credit to, that describes the effect of decreased pH and increased CO2 in helping to unload more oxygen to the muscle. And his name is Christian Bohr, B-O-H-R. So this is sometimes called the Bohr effect, okay? Christian Bohr effect. Okay? The decreased pH, increased CO2, helping to release more oxygen from the hemoglobin to the muscle. And so this slogan here at the bottom, all local changes and muscle metabolites are oxygen unloaders. So again, it is a very nice coincidence or a created design. So every time you exercise, the muscle produces, there are a lot of changes in the muscle. And all these changes tends to cause hemoglobin to release more oxygen. So again, this is a third marvelous point about skeletal muscle physiology. So you can see the sentence at the bottom, skeletal muscle metabolism enhances its own oxygen extraction. Okay, that point. Fourth point, next slide. Now, fourth point, there's a person here. I wonder whether you will know who I'm talking about. Okay, so now as the muscles are exercising, obviously you are releasing more CO2, carbon dioxide, and the body has to get rid of the CO2 by transporting it to the lungs, and in the lungs it is expired. So in the same way that that the increased CO2 causes more hemoglobin to release more oxygen, when the muscles are exercising, the level of oxygen in your muscle is obviously lower. Now there's an interesting phenomena whereby the lower CO2 in the muscle will actually now cause the blood to take up to carry more CO2. And this is obviously important, isn't it? Because blood that flows from the exercising muscle now will be able to carry more CO2 because of the reduction in the oxygen in the muscle. And this effect has been described by this person called Haldane. Okay, as your muscles are more active, you have muscle hypoxia. The muscle hypoxia actually promotes hemoglobin and the blood to carry more CO2 to the lungs in order to be released. So here we have what is known as the Haldane's effect. So you have the Bohr's effect in the muscle during exercise. You also have the Haldane's effect. So I put this as a sentence. The autonomous, that means is very independent. The independent active muscles enhances its oxygen extraction and also promotes the CO2 transport and removal. Okay, so the first part is Bohr's effect. The second part is Haldane's effect. So the next one. Okay, so this is something which I want to just summarize for you. So although CO2 is a metabolic product from the muscle, as whole body physiologists, what you all are, sports scientists, you should begin to see, hopefully, that CO2 is not just a metabolic product. It has many other functions in the body, okay? So, for example, let me just show you 4 main functions. One, number 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 or number 3 is what I already mentioned, is something called the Bohr's effect, okay? Number 1, the major chemical respiratory control of breathing is actually carbon dioxide. It's not oxygen, okay? I hope you've done this or will be doing this in your control of respiration, okay? CO2 in your blood is the primary and key control of breathing, not really oxygen, okay? The second one is something we already mentioned, that as in the muscle, when you have more CO2, the CO2 itself vasodilate the blood vessel so that you can have more blood flow, okay? So CO2 is a smooth muscle vasodilator for tissue blood perfusion, okay? And then the fifth one is that CO2 is a very important determinant of how the body homeostatically control the blood pH or the extracellular fluid pH, okay? So because CO2 forms carbonic acid, and carbonic acid together with bicarbonate in the extracellular fluid are the most important chemical buffer in the body, okay? So let's move to the next slide. So this is just to acknowledge, so when you are studying your physiology or any other subject, it is always good to look at the historical fathers or the heritage of your current knowledge, okay? And nowadays it's so easy to find information. So if you think about the capillaries, which is obviously very important when you think about muscle function, there are 3 persons that you need to acknowledge. One is Starling, because there is something called Starlings Capillary Dynamics. I hope you've done this, or maybe you will be doing this in your physiology. So there's something called Capillary Dynamics, which is contributed by Ernest Starling. Now, Adolf Fick is a German, obviously, and he is the one that came up with several laws or principles in physiology. So for example, the diffusion of substances in the capillary is described by Fick's law of diffusion. So we need to recognize Fick. And August Crowe here on the left is somebody who has done a lot of studies on your capillary network. So just Google his name and read a little bit about him. Next slide. Okay, this is back to the oxyhemoglobin curve. Now I want to just mention something, and this is highlighted by the sentence here. The primary, below the graph, the primary purpose of increased ventilation, pulmonary ventilation, or breathing, in simple words, during physical activity or exercise or sports is not for better oxygenation. Now, if you just read this sentence, I don't know whether that surprised you, because everybody assumed that when you increase your breathing, the main aim is to oxygenate your blood, right? Because you think about breathing and oxygen. So let me read this again and think about this. The primary purpose of increased ventilation is not for better oxygenation. That's not the main reason. But, and this is the big but, so in capital letters, but to prevent hypercapnia. Hypercapnia is just accumulation of CO2, because as your muscles exercise, CO2 actually becomes greater. So actually the main aim of ventilation is actually to remove your CO2, because increased CO2 will cause acidosis, and acidosis, if it is too severe, can depress your brain function, depress neuronal function. Okay, so what about the oxygen? If the main purpose of ventilation is not for oxygen, how do you supply more oxygen to your muscle? Now, this is where the oxyhemoglobin curve explains a little bit more. So if you look at this curve, you find that at the end here is a plateau, right? It flattens out. And this plateau happens about 60 millimeter mercury. So normally, what is the partial pressure of oxygen in your blood is about close to 100. Okay, so but from 60 to 100, actually, the hemoglobin is almost fully saturated, almost about 90%. So this makes the point that when you hyperventilate, you are not really increasing the oxygen content very much more, but you are definitely helping to remove more CO2. Okay, so the more important factor in order to increase more oxygen to your tissue is actually the blood flow. It's not to increase the content, because as the blood flows, it is bringing more oxygenated blood to the cells. Let's see the next slide. Okay, so this is a formula for calculating how much oxygen is delivered to your cells per time, per minute. Okay, so this is given by cardiac output, the blood flow, multiplied by arterial oxygen content. So I have just said that increased ventilation is not so much to increase the oxygen content, because of the graph, it shows the saturation. So the more important factor during, you don't have to, can we see the words here? The more important factor to increase the blood oxygen supply to your muscles during exercise is to increase the cardiac output. Okay, so cardiac output multiplied by oxygen content gives you the total amount of oxygen delivered to the cells per minute. Now, I won't go into detail the graph. This is a little bit complicated. So this phenomena is just something called perfusion limited transport. It highlights the point that in the lungs, very easily, very soon, you will saturate your blood with oxygen. So in order to supply more oxygen per time to your tissue, you actually need to increase the cardiac output. Because if you depend just on the diffusion in the lung, you will not necessarily increase the oxygen content very much. Okay, so this factor is not the main factor to supply more oxygen to your cells, okay, during exercise. The more important factor is the cardiac output. Now, now you would have been told about that there are different categories of hypoxia. I hope you've done this. So if you understand this concept, that the amount of oxygen delivered to the cells, muscle cells, is dependent on cardiac output multiplied by the arterial oxygen content, then you begin to realize that as long as the cells do not receive oxygen, it is considered as hypoxia, right? So even if your blood is well oxygenated, okay, but if the blood does not flow, there's not much point, isn't it, for the muscle? So oxygenated blood must flow. If oxygenated blood does not flow, the cells will not receive your oxygen. And this is also considered as a hypoxia. We call this stagnant hypoxia. It means the blood is not flowing. It's a stagnant flow, okay? So based on this concept, there are 4 categories of hypoxia. And I just want to just quickly give you a cartoon yeah, next slide, yeah. So this is normally discussed in almost 30 minutes, but this is a sentence here, okay? Hypoxia, it means what the cells experience is always defined from the perspective of the cell. So I put this cartoon, 2 cells here talking to one another. Let's take a selfie. This is sounds like selfie, okay? So as I just said, there are 4 different categories of hypoxia. One is called stagnant hypoxia in purple here, okay? So, and there are other categories of hypoxia, which I think your lecturer will describe to you. Histotoxic hypoxia just means that even if the blood is oxygenated, but if the cells are poisoned by metabolic poison and cannot use the oxygen, from the perspective of the cell, it is also hypoxia. So we call this histotoxic hypoxia. Okay, but in the first 2 categories, this is where you find that there is an actual decrease in the oxygen content. Okay, so without going into too much detail, I think we should just wanted to leave you with this summary, and I hope you can appreciate this after you have had more cardiovascular physiology. Let's move on to the next slide and come back to skeletal muscle. Okay, so this is a next slide, yeah. So yeah, so we pause here just to show you a cartoon done by one student in Malaysia. She was a 2nd prize winner in an international physiology comic competition, and I wrote the conversation for her. And if you understand your physiology, you might appreciate this cartoon. It's a conversation between skeletal muscle and smooth muscle. Okay, so this is smooth muscle. You recognize that this looks like a smooth muscle fiber. So this is skeletal muscle. It looks like the skeletal muscle fiber. Okay, so smooth muscle says, "Why are you always so excitable?" So this reminds you that skeletal muscle is obviously an excitable tissue, and the impulse is always excitatory. And they say, hey, I have to be constantly on the move, exercise, physical activity, all that. And then smooth muscle, obviously, we talk about relaxation of the blood vessel or that. I need to relax quite often or my pressure will go up. Remember the formula? When you vasodilate, you decrease your TPR, and so you help to maintain pressure. So this is some physiology here. And then skeletal muscle, of course, we have myosin in common. Myosin sounds like we have many things in common. We have myosin in common. Yes, and we have common friends like Carl. So who is Carl? Carl is obviously calcium. Okay, Carl. Calcium is the main key controller for all muscle contraction. And then skeletal muscle say you are so chill anyway, and always help to keep things cool. Remember I said that during exercise there is vasodilation. The smooth muscle relax, and so that helps you to lose heat and maintain body temperature. And this is an English phrase. Say, hey, don't smooth talk me. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's move on to back to physiology. Next slide. Okay, this is a little bit complex. We'll spend about at least 5 minutes here. So I think all of us know that during exercise, your breathing increase. You don't have to think about it, it is increased. Now, how does your breathing increase? How does your ventilation increase during exercise? Now, obviously, you on the top here in green, you obviously might think that perhaps the oxygen partial pressure will decrease, or perhaps the carbon dioxide will increase, or perhaps there is some change in the pH of the blood. Because all these 3 are normally the 3 main stimulus for respiration. But surprisingly, during exercise, at least moderate exercise, when you are jogging or in swimming or that, when the exercise physiologists measure the partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of CO2, and the hydrogen ion concentration, the pH, these values actually doesn't change very much. So which means that if you want to explain how the ventilation increase during exercise, it is not simply a change in the oxygen, CO2, or hydrogen ion, because the values doesn't change so much. So which means that there are many other factors which contribute to sustaining the increased ventilation. So this chart here shows you other possible inputs to the respiratory center. The respiratory center is obviously in your brainstem, and this is where your respiratory neurons are. So they think that maybe increase in temperature may also stimulate the respiratory neurons, okay? And perhaps there may be higher centers. This is part of what is known as conditioned response. So for example, even before you run, at the beginning of a sprint, you already increase your breathing, right? Even before you contract your muscle. So this is what is known as conditioned reflex from the higher centers. Now they think that during exercise, your adrenaline also has some influence on the respiratory center in orange here. And as I mentioned, your potassium concentration tends to increase slightly in your extracellular fluid during exercise, because every action potential will release some potassium into the fluid because of the repolarization of action potential, okay? And so now what I want to tell you in a short while is that in recent years, there has been new evidence for other sensory receptors in the muscle. And these are described as chemical receptors. This is chemical receptors in the muscle, and also stretch mechanical receptors in the muscle. So every time you contract a muscle, you release chemical metabolites, and these stimulate the sensory receptors in the muscle that then sends an input to the respiratory center. At the same time that the muscles are contracting, and especially including your main respiratory muscle, which is your diaphragm, okay? You also send efferent impulses because of the mechanoreceptors within the skeletal muscle, okay? So the skeletal muscle includes both your diaphragm, which is a skeletal muscle, as well as the skeletal muscles that you are using during physical activity. So the next slide is fairly complex to highlight. Okay, we're going to spend 5 minutes here. So this is on the right here in big font size, okay, is that the skeletal muscle, there are now a lot of evidence that there are other sensory receptors found in the skeletal muscle called mechanoreceptors, as well as chemical receptors called metabol. This is from metabolism that helps to sustain the increased alveolar ventilation, okay? So looking at the diagram, so let's look at this carefully. This is obviously the brain, and this is your, in green here at the top, yeah, in green here at the top is your brainstem, where you have your chemoreceptors, central chemoreceptors, and your brainstem is also where you have the respiratory center, okay? So so going further down, can we shrink the diagram? Yeah, just shrink it, yeah, okay. So going further down, I think let's show the whole thing, yeah. Can we show the whole thing? Because, can we shrink a little bit more? Okay, it's all right, yeah. So you can see here. So so I want you to notice at the diaphragm here, you find that there is also metaboreceptors, okay? And this stimulates the phrenic nerve, afferent nerve from the diaphragm, and this goes to the brainstem. And so you also have mechanoreceptors as the lungs are being stretched during breathing, that also helps to send sensory impulses to the brainstem. And obviously within the muscle, the last box here, which is partially hidden, doesn't matter. You can see mechano and metaboreceptors within the muscle. And this also helps to send efferent impulses. And all this contributes to the increased activity of the respiratory neurons in the brainstem, okay? So obviously on the right here at the bottom, you have your peripheral chemoreceptors, which normally detects changes in oxygen, CO2, and hydrogen ion. Okay, and there may be some role involving potassium. Okay, so I just wanted to pass you this more recent information. You can read about it. There's a lot of information as sports scientists that now there are actually a lot of evidence about these two subtypes of sensory receptors, the skeletal mechanoreceptors and the skeletal metaboreceptors that are stimulated every time you exercise in order to sustain the increased ventilation. Okay, next slide. So we move to the next slide. Okay, now we go on to the last point. I think is it the last point? Yeah, the last point is that yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Okay, the muscle is not just an exercising organ. Okay, for locomotion. Now we know that the muscle is also part of the endocrine system. It produces a lot of hormone, and some of these hormones have endocrine effect. Some have autocrine, that means it stimulates some of its own cells, and some have paracrine effect. It is not released into circulation. And this is a simplified diagram, is that every time the muscle contracts, it releases myokines. Okay, these are the chemicals released by the muscle, and these myokines circulates in the blood. It has effects in the brain. It has effect on metabolism in the liver, and very important, it has effect. Let's shrink the slide. Can we shrink the slide? Yeah, this is important. In the fat cells, okay, adipose tissue, it has generally inhibitory action in the fat cells. Now, why is this important? Every time you exercise, and as sports scientists, you are promoting exercise for better health, isn't it? So this is what now seen as one of the main reasons why exercise seems to help in a lot of health conditions. Because every time the muscle contracts, it is releasing a lot of myokines. And there are now, if you just Google a whole list of myokines, some are more well established, some less well established. Next slide. So this is the Chinese philosophy about balance, the yin and the yang. Of course, this is the fat cells on the right, and this is the muscle cell on the left. So now we know that in the promotion of healthy living and regular exercise, there is these two main components. Okay, fat cells again on the right. Fat cells are not just fat cells. Fat cells also, they are now considered as part of the endocrine system, because the first hormone released from fat is leptin, important in control of hunger and feeding. Okay. Now we also know that fat cells also release a lot of adipokines from the adipose tissue, and these adipokines, most of them are pro-inflammatory. It promotes inflammation, and a lot of diseases in the body have inflammatory mechanism. So now what is happening is that muscles release myokines, fat cells release adipokines. The adipokines are pro-inflammatory, and the myokines released from the muscles tend to inhibit a lot of action of these adipokines. And so overall, this is the reason why they think that muscle activity, regular muscle activity, will help to reduce the incidence of metabolic syndrome and other chronic metabolic diseases. Next slide. Okay, this is just a little bit more detail. So metabolic disease, which is now an important factor. In Malaysia, it is mentioned that we have one of the highest rate of diabetes in Asia, in Malaysia, because of the diet. So this is sedentary lifestyle, a lot of fat cells. This is regular exercise, a lot of muscle cell. And so some of the benefits are mentioned here: muscle hypertrophy, antioxidant capacity, and mitochondrial biogenesis. Now, of course, the fatter you are, you tend to accumulate fat. You produce pro-inflammatory adipokines, and also some of the others mentioned here. Okay, and the myokines, again, these are some of the example. The names are fairly complex. We don't need to know the details, but basically there is now a balance between myokines, which are beneficial, and pro-inflammatory adipokines. Okay, so I leave that for you to read on your own. Maybe if you are doing a research paper, you can choose this as a topic for your essay, myokines during muscle contraction. And the next slide, maybe the last slide. Okay, so this is a summary. As I mentioned from the beginning, your muscles are, skeletal muscles are marvelous organ, okay, because it performs many essential functions for its own needs. And lastly, we see how the muscle function as it contracts also sustain ventilation. And the last point I just mentioned, that the contraction also releases multifunctional myokines with endocrine activity, paracrine activity, as well as what do you call it, an autocrine activity. So skeletal muscle, the skeletal muscle contraction pump contributes to increased cardiac output. The skeletal muscle metabolism leads to its own vasodilation and increase in blood flow. And this is, and the skeletal muscle metabolism enhances its own oxygen extraction. This is Bohr's effect. The skeletal muscle metabolism promotes the transport and removal of CO2. This is Haldane's effect. Okay, and then you have the two new subtype of sensory receptors, mechano and metaboreceptors in the muscle. As you are exercising, impulses from these two newly described receptors also help to sustain the increased breathing during exercise. And we just mentioned about the myokines. So I think that this may be the last slide. Next slide, let's have a look. Okay, well, this is just my contact. I'm happy to, so most of the time I leave my contact with the students, especially students overseas who are having this Zoom session, so that we can continue to interact and have conversation, so that, and then if you have any other questions about any areas of physiology, I welcome you to contact me either by my email, or you can freely contact me by my WhatsApp. I will be happy to get to know you and interact with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Cheng Hwee Ming. It's very interesting topic and very wonderful and very interactive. So you have a lot of way how to make how to make us understand about physiology. Usually, you know, in sports science, student maybe physiology is too difficult, but when you teaching for us, it's very easy to understand.
Oh,
Thank you
okay.
very much. And now it's time to question and answer. Is it okay?
Yes, sure,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, please, student or the participant in here. So not only student from UNES, also
Okay.
have from Philippines.
Philippines.
Yeah,
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Yaman.
Welcome. Yeah. Hope to
And
hear from you from the Philippines. Yeah.
yeah, and then in here have the chief of department of sports science, uh, Dr. Sugiarto, Bapak Sugiarto.
Pleased to meet you, Mr.
Yeah,
Gato. Yeah.
he's expert in physiology also.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and here also have Dr. Anis.
Pleased to meet you, Dr. Anis.
And wait, I will show you. Here, I think it's from all Indonesia also, because
Okay.
I share this lecture for the Association
Right.
of Exercise Physiology Indonesia.
Great. Great. Yes,
And
I noticed we have about 150 participants. That's good
yeah,
response. Yeah. Nice.
151 before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So this is half one from Hadian. I think this is Dr. Hadian. No. Dear Prof. Cheng, would you please explain the function pre-capillary sphincter and the role in skeletal muscle? Thank you very much.
Pre-capillary sphincter.
Yes.
Yeah, the pre-capillary sphincter before the capillary obviously is key to controlling the amount of blood flow that reaches the skeletal muscle. So as I mentioned, the smooth muscle of the precapillary sphincter obviously respond to all the metabolites, all the metabolites that we mentioned. So for example, decreased oxygen, increased CO2, pH decrease, and even potassium have vasodilatory effect. So as the precapillary sphincter dilates, then you get increased recruitment of more capillaries as well as dilation of capillaries. And so the total surface area for capillary exchange increases. Yeah. So that is obviously important to sustain the increased metabolism of the more active muscle. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Hadian.
Thank you, Professor.
Hadian?
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Bu
Yeah.
Martinez. Yeah. Matur nuwun sangat.
Yeah, good to see you here, Hadian.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Yeah.
Could you open your video, please?
I'm sorry. This is my laptop is without camera.
It's okay, Hadian. We are colleagues. Yeah, I know what he looks like.
If you give me 5 minutes, I can change the position to the camera.
Sure.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. It's very honor.
Thank you very much, Bu Martinez. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the others want asking directly to Professor Cheng Hwee Ming. Hello. So not too interactive. Why? Usually they asking so many, but maybe they're too shy.
Yeah.
Dr. Anis want to ask him something. Oh, this is Mulyati. Usually she asking.
Oh, hello. Yeah.
Okay, Mulyati, your time to ask. Okay. Where is he? Okay, so if not, I will ask him.
Okay.
Do you know usually when the muscle contraction, right? And how the connection with the synapse. This is still maybe not easy to understand from student, especially in sports science. How the connection from the motor end plate to the muscle and what the how to say the ions that appear in there. Yeah.
The neuromuscular junction.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the junction between the motor fiber, we call it the alpha motor neuron, and the skeletal muscle fiber, is like a synapse, but of course it's unusual in that it is not between two synapses. It's between one synapse and the muscle fiber. So it is special because the stimulus is always excitatory. In the synapse, you can have excitatory as well as inhibitory. But for the neuromuscular junction, it is always excitation. That is why in the cartoon, the smooth muscle is asking the skeletal muscle, why are you always so excitable? It's just to remind the students that they call it the neuromuscular junction always releases an excitatory neurotransmitter, and of course that neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. So when the muscles relax, it is not because of an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It is less acetylcholine, less excitatory. Okay, so the development of action potential obviously is also necessary to depolarize the muscle fiber. So and it always uses the same ion fluxes, sodium coming in and then potassium going out. Okay, so the only difference is that in the muscle, the depolarization happens because of a chemical binding. That's why we call it the ligand-gated ion channel. So acetylcholine binds to the receptor on the muscle fiber. It is activated by this ligand or chemical and opens the sodium and potassium channel that helps to depolarize the muscle fiber. Beyond the end plate, then you get the usual opening of the voltage gated channel. Yeah. So the same principle is applied for both excitable cells, skeletal muscle, as well as action potential. So the basic understanding of the ion fluxes in an action potential is very important. In fact, it was so important that 1963, the three scientists who described how sodium come in and how potassium go out, sounds very boring, right? They were given the Nobel Prize for describing the ionic basis of electrical impulse transmission. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, is understand maybe the student. Okay. So, oh, here I have Dr. Hadian.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
again.
Thank you.
Okay, and then have one question again. It's about from Hanna Chakrawati. Dear Prof. Cheng, so he was asking about if they do exercise about the value of pH, the normal value of pH, and also about the how to say it, the pressure of carbon dioxide, also normal, but it's may sometimes cause of the how to say this is menyebab is make the expiratory have stimulate expiratory system. I don't know what this means. So maybe he asking about if they do exercise and then why we have more increase, let's increase to breathing. Maybe he won't ask about like that.
Yeah, so as I was trying to summarize very briefly, it was a surprise to exercise physiologists when they first measured the partial pressure of oxygen, CO2, and pH, that in most moderate exercise, these values doesn't change so much. So now they think that maybe if they are able to measure the values every 10 seconds, maybe there's some oscillation in some of these values. If you measure it every 10, 15 minutes, the values are quite the same. So it doesn't appear to be the stimulus that we normally describe in the textbook. So maybe the second by second oscillatory changes they think may actually provide some stimulus. But of course now they believe that there are other sensory stimulus like what I described, the muscle mechanoreceptors and as well as the metaboreceptors, and there may be role of even potassium, adrenaline, higher cortical center stimulus. Yeah, so it's an interesting, obviously interesting phenomena, this exercise hyperventilation. Yeah.
Okay. I hope answer your question, Miranti. No, not Miranti. Again, then one more from Miranti Dewi Paramingtias. He asking about the skeletal muscle contraction. So is there any role of magnesium ion beside calcium in the process of contraction? Thank you.
Role of potassium?
Yeah.
Yeah, the role of potassium in basic muscle physiology and nerve physiology obviously is to contribute to the resting membrane potential. So if you are hypokalemic, then your resting membrane potential for the excitable cell become more negative. We call that hyperpolarized, which means that both your nerve, in the case of the alpha motor neuron nerve, as well as the muscle that it innervates, will be less excitable. And so that is why one of the complaints from the patient, if they have electrolyte imbalance, hypokalemia, is that since the muscles are harder to stimulate, they will experience muscle weakness. Yeah. So hypokalemia is one of the contributing electrolyte disturbance for muscle weakness, yeah, because of the hyperpolarization.
About like cramps. Do you know cramps? So when
Yeah,
when we're doing exercise and then have a cramps, the muscle cannot relax. So,
yeah, cramps is yeah. I don't understand cramps myself. It must be definitely if muscles contract, it must involve some triggering by calcium, increase in calcium. Yeah, how that is happens during exercise, where you get a spurt of calcium. I can't explain to you. Yeah, yeah. Maybe I have to read around, and maybe the sports science students can read around and can educate me when they find something.
okay, Miranti, okay, you can.
Prof, I'm sorry, but I mean magnesium ion, Prof.
Oh, magnesium. Yeah, magnesium is what I call. There's still very little information about magnesium in the textbook, and of course, it's not because it's not important. It's just that there seems to be less information. Maybe because the serum determination, the technique to detect magnesium, is not so commonly available. That may be a contributing factor. But magnesium is obviously very important. It's part of enzyme and all that. So, and also involved, I think, in blood pressure control. So how magnesium is involved in skeletal muscle physiology, definitely the ATPase. Can somebody remind me? Is the ATPase in the skeletal muscle that involves magnesium, right? Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes.
yes,
It
yes,
does, right? Yeah, yeah. So that there's a role there. Yeah.
in
So
ATPS.
yeah, but in terms of the actual ionic flux for muscle contraction, it is obviously primarily calcium. Yeah, because that triggers your troponin and all that. But the magnesium is part of the ATPase in the myosin head, right?
Okay, Prof. Thank you.
Okay. So is it, you got the answer? Miranti?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Titin.
Okay. And then have question again from Aki. Okay. Okay, Prof. Ardian, you can directly ask into Professor Cheng. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Then
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Bu Sri Sumartiningsih. My question is, when we do exercise, Professor, at the beginning of exercise, our ventilation rate is increased abruptly. But after that, our ventilation rate is flat, not increased. So, and before we finish, the ventilation rate will decrease gradually. Can you explain the mechanism or why after increase abruptly, our ventilation rate is flat, not increase, or maybe go up and go down, but flat. Yeah.
yeah, so the initial increase in ventilation, yeah, the initial increase they think is obviously either a condition or higher cortical control, because even before your muscles are performing, you already have this increase in the ventilation. Same thing applies for, they think that if they measure the blood flow in the skeletal muscle, even before the muscles exercise, there may actually be some maybe neurally mediated vasodilation in the muscle. So again, this may be cortical control. Once ventilation has increased, there is obviously a limit to the maximum capacity to increase ventilation, just the capacity of the lungs. So the amount of activity in the muscle will obviously be matched by hopefully the ventilation, which, as I said, mainly is to remove CO2 because of the plateau of the hemoglobin oxygen curve. The cardiac output is obviously multiplied several fold. So the cardiac output times the slightly increased oxygen content maintains the oxygen delivery. Once the exercise ceases, I think it gradually decreases because of what is known as the oxygen debt. They have to cater to this, in biochemistry is known as the oxygen debt, so that gradually things are normalized. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yeah. Thank you very much, Bu Sri Sumartiningsih.
Thank you, Prof. Dian, for your time in here. Thank you for sharing for us also.
Yeah, I enjoyed meeting all of you. Yeah.
So you have now like reunion, right?
Yeah, I hope to be able to physically meet some of you in Semarang
We hope to.
once the COVID is over.
Yeah. And then he asked, then have one question from Eki Aldabit. So he asking about the kind of the sport, what kind of the correctly sport. Yeah. I think he asking about the research subject. So when you want to get the blood pressure and the increasing of hemoglobin, which sport can do that? Which exactly sport?
Or to increase your hematocrit.
Yeah, hemoglobin and blood pressure.
Oh,
So for subject, with what kind of sport for the subject?
yeah, I'm not so familiar with the kind of training, but apparently there is some talk about for some of these athletes that while they are preparing for a major competition, they are encouraged to train under slightly hypoxic condition, so that increases the hematocrit. So whether that is considered as legal or illegal in terms of, it's almost like it's not blood doping, but you are exposing yourself to either a natural, you go out the higher mountain to train, or a artificial, you train in a slightly hypoxic chamber. I don't know. Yeah, but that is it can be artificially induced. Yeah, because the hematocrit is obviously stimulated by sensing of the hypoxia. Yeah.
So if
But,
like,
sorry, yes, yeah.
yeah, yes, you first.
The maintenance of adequate blood pressure is obviously a function of the cardiac cardiac the cardiac muscle. I mean, yeah.
Okay. So maybe like what kind of sport? Maybe like cycling or running. Can they take for subject?
I think in terms of hematocrit, I don't unless you are I don't know, if you are involved in like a extreme sport, maybe because of the exposure to long-term hypoxic situation in the tissue, maybe that might stimulate the hematocrit. I don't really know. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you. Maybe after this, Dr. Hadian can answer.
Yeah.
Oh, Prof. Cheng is
Because I have two professor in here.
no, I'm not yet. I'm not professor yet.
Okay.
Please
Yeah.
pray for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make more questions?
Yes, please.
Yes, Professor. During COVID pandemic, I oftenly saw the people exercise using face mask. So, can the use of can maybe is there any effect of using face mask to oxygenation and also for the muscle contraction and muscle metabolism during exercise when we use face mask? Is there any effect?
Yeah. So I suppose depends on the kind of face mask you're using. If it's a very loose ones, I think the ventilation should still be quite adequate. I think it's the discomfort of having something over your nose and the mouth. Yeah. But if it's one of those better quality one, which I would be surprised why why would somebody want to wear that? Where the airflow is
Yeah, because
more restricted, then I think it might affect. I don't know, because you are obviously breathing in. If your rate of breathing is faster during exercise, then you are likely breathing in some of the expired air again. Yeah, I mean, depending on the kind of exercise you're doing.
Because the rule is to use face mask when we outside.
Yes.
And also I hear the report of Black, the rupture of the lung alveoli.
Oh, really?
They use face mask during exercise.
Yeah.
But any effect to muscle contraction, for example, muscle metabolism when we use it?
Muscle. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I think they are perhaps because this is very new. It's only been a few months since the global lockdown. So even in Malaysia, they are, for those who use a gym, they're asking them to wear masks. So I don't know whether there's enough data to show that there's some. Yeah, because this is like an acute response where they ask to wear. Yeah, I don't have the answer for that.
Yes, maybe we have to do research about it, Professor. Yeah.
This is together.
Maybe UNES can.
Hopefully, we don't have to do the research. COVID will be over. Then we don't have to.
Yeah, Bu Sri Sumati can do research about exercise during using Christmas, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Bu Sumati. Thank you, Professor. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Hardian. Thank you very much. And I want to ask you again. So we have still so much time. Professor, here have Dr. Setia Rahayu also. And then have Dr. Siti Paito. You know, still
Thank you very much, Prof. Cheng.
Hello, good to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Hello. Yeah.
Okay, and then okay, wait. Maybe anyone want asking directly to Professor Cheng? Okay, this Rahmat. Okay, Rahmat. You can directly to asking to Professor Cheng. You can show up. Rahmat?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, hello.
Hello, Prof. Cheng
Hello,
and Dr. Hadian.
Hello.
Talking about using mask, it depends on the burden of the exercise or sport. Yeah. So if you do a higher burden of exercise, it's not recommended you use a facial mask. And of course, yeah, it depends on your status of the respiratory system and cardiovascular system. Yeah, those who have some comorbid should be more cautious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello?
And for every one of us, actually there's another webinar from Auckland. Yeah. Tomorrow will be the last day. It's on 4 consecutive days starting from Tuesday. Yeah. It starts on 4:30 in the morning Indonesian time, yeah, West Indonesian time. Yeah, this morning it just ended around 6:45. So for these 3 days, I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning. But it's very, what we say, informative and comprehensive. It comes from all over the world, yeah, from Australia, Tasmania, and USA, and some other. There's just an addition for our information. Tomorrow will be the last day. You can join. Yeah, you can see at your email. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rahmat. So Mr. Rahmat now in Australia or in Indonesia?
No, I'm in Indonesia, in Medan now.
Oh, yeah. Medan.
And also, sorry, I'm late joining because I just get the news that Prof. Cheng is giving this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Prof. and everyone.
Yes, same here, Rahmat.
So, thank you very much, Dr. Rahmat. So, any else want asking? We still have time. We have the expert in here. Okay. And
Can I ask more?
yeah, of course.
Sorry, Professor Cheng.
It's okay.
Asking many questions. Yeah, Professor, your lecture is muscle contraction when the actively contraction, Professor. So nowadays we have equipment like NMAS, neuromuscular electric stimulation. So it's kind of like equipment that we put in our muscle, and then our muscle will contract, not by ourselves, but according to the pulse from the equipment. Is there any difference of muscular metabolism during when we use when we use our muscle actively, or and with that equipment? Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, they have observed that in terms of the myokines that I mentioned at the end, even electrical stimulation will release myokines. So this is obviously artificially stimulated. But in terms of, so you're asking whether you can have muscle hypertrophy by stimulating? I don't really know actually, yeah. But I suppose for those who are having mobility problem, the regular stimulation does help to prevent atrophy. Yeah. So, but I think for a normal person, the best way to want to increase the muscle mass would be just go out and exercise normally. Yeah. So I think for patient use, obviously, I think it probably slows down the rate of atrophy of the muscle. Yeah.
Because nowadays a lot of gyms have a special suit that so many
yes.
yeah, so they stimulate a lot of muscle during one time, yeah. And then the cost is very expensive. Yeah.
I think it's still better to just exercise in a normal way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Bu Sri Sumartiningsih. Yeah.
Thank you,
Halo, Bu.
Mardian.
Halo, Bu Baitul. Assalamualaikum. Ya.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Matur nuwun Pak, sudah rawuh di Zoom.
Matur nuwun, boleh ikut. Ya, terima kasih. Ya, thank you. Allow me to hear Professor Cheng lecture. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Halo Ibu Sri.
Yes, Adranta, you're here.
Yeah.
Selamat pagi Ibu Sri, selamat siang. Ibu Sri, or the sport teachers, how many hours you teach muscle physiology?
You have to ask.
I ask Ibu Sri first. I ask Ibu Sri.
Yeah, they have to teach a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. How many hours you teach muscle physiology? Berapa jam Anda?
Yeah, muted Asri. Yeah.
Teaching for physiology?
Yeah, muscle.
Muscle.
Yeah, otot.
3 GP. Just only one time, but in 3 SKS.
3 SKS is for one semester.
Yes.
3 hours per week.
Just just 1 week, but 3 hours.
Only
Yeah.
only one time 3 hours for muscle physiology.
Yeah, I think it's need more, right?
Yeah, you are in sport. You need more, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe you can teach for us, Dr. Adriana. Very nice to meet you. You know, I lost your contact because I changed my phone and I don't have your contact. And I'm lucky you are here and your name is Surya, not Adriana in here. So I cannot recognize you. Thank you very much.
Now I turn the question to Professor Cheng. Who
Okay.
teach muscle physiology there? Is it you or another guy in
Uh,
Malaysia?
I seldom teach muscle physiology.
Okay.
Normally one of my colleagues, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but for tutorials, we have to handle all topics. So we have to sort of be able to answer the students' question.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, I think physiology, you need more teaching for muscle.
Yes.
Like there is isometric contraction, isotonic contraction, and then the sensory system or the regulation actually, which Prof. Cheng have not yet. Put sensors to the brain to prevent muscle damage, the muscle spindle and the Golgi tendon. So that's important too for sport, I think. And what about the and length relationship for contraction? Also important in sport, I think. So maybe the question from Professor Hardian for the stimulus just with electrical things. I don't know the length of each muscle when it is relaxed. It's not the same when you are exercising, I think.
Yes.
So the optimal tension you get is not so big. And that's why that's important consideration too. Yeah, but Prof. Cheng is right because you prevent at least atrophy. Otherwise, it's for patient. But for the sport guys, I don't know why they use that with many equipments. I don't know that.
Yeah.
It's new for me that they have in the gym people using these electrodes. So it makes them lazy, not using the normal physiology. But maybe there is something else. We have to know more about that because the equipment is not cheap, I think. If you put all these gadgets on your biceps, on your gastrocnemius, maybe on your belt, so there must be something because electrical stimulus, maybe you get something odd, not for the contraction per se, but for other things, maybe. So we have to think about it. Why they put that equipment in? But I think yes, maybe just a suggestion. You have to teach Ibu Sri, the
Yes.
students, maybe 2 times 3 hours, and let them discuss a lot about muscle because that's very important, I think, for the students. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
comment, Prof. Cheng?
Thank you.
No, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, I'm very lucky today. I have so many professors in here, joining here. Thank you. They are all expert in here. And do you know, maybe can answer about the mechanism of delay onset muscle. So usually when doing exercise and heavy weight training, or they sometimes to tumor load. So sometimes they got the delayed onset muscle. So could you explain to us how the mechanism of delayed onset muscle? Thank you. So three of you can answer. Because I have three experts in here.
Sorry, what is it? Delayed onset?
Delayed onset muscle.
So soreness, DOMS.
DOMS. DOM.
Delayed on soreness. You get
Oh,
pain
delayed
or
onset soreness,
yeah,
yeah.
soreness. Yes. Yeah, it's like fatigue,
Right.
and sometimes fatigue can also you can get pain
Yeah.
if you.
It's probably the timeline of the inflammatory process. So it takes a
Yes.
while for the mediators to be released. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, yeah. And of course, depending on the severity of the exercise. Yeah. Yeah. So it has to be chemically mediated because of the fact that it's delayed. Yeah.
Yes.
What about the physiological happen when get delayed onset muscle? How about the physiological happen? So what happened with the muscle?
What is this? The heartburn? Did you say heartburn?
What happened inside the muscle? So when the people exercise and then they get sometimes very tired, hình lê to hình lê. So then some inside the muscle that the delayed onset muscle. Maybe you can tell us on the physiology.
So muscle fatigue obviously can be attributed to several sites of fatigue. One could be the neuromuscular, the depletion of the neurotransmitter, or it could be intramuscular, the change in the parameters that inhibits the excitability of the muscle, or it could be also the cortical. There's some higher centers, what do you call that? Condition control. Yeah. So of course, depending on the person and the degree of activity, the fatigue can be in various sites, whether at the neuromuscular junction, within the muscle itself, or maybe high up in the motor center. Yeah.
So in the neuromuscular junction, no more produce calcium to make relax or something?
I think the calcium concentration shouldn't fall too low. It cannot be because the calcium transmembrane gradient is always very steep. So I don't think your calcium is decreased to such an extent that the influx would be disturbed, because the gradient is about 1,000 times. Is millimolar outside the cell, and within the cell is micromolar because of the pumping into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So I don't think it's the calcium deficiency that causes the fatigue. It's more other factors like maybe even the potassium outside the muscle fiber, the pH, and some other metabolic factor, or maybe something to do with the sliding filament fatigue, which I don't understand. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Cheng.
May I add?
Yes, please.
Miss Sri Sumartiningsih.
Yes, please, Dr. Hadian.
No, not
Rahmat.
Dr. Rahmat.
Dr. Rahmat, yes. Because
just as Prof. Cheng has mentioned, there is a factor of intra and extramuscular. Intramuscular, that means there's an accumulation of lactic acid. Yeah. And also how you train. Yeah. Training, as Dr. Hadrian has mentioned, for using the equipment, I know I ever heard of it. it costs ratusan juta loh itu. Not cheap.
Expensive.
So, and that is for, just as Prof. Cheng has mentioned, it's for fighting against atrophy. Yeah, that is for in the rehabilitation process. If you use the whole body, that means he's somewhat severely near atrophy. So if we want to have a hypertrophy of the muscle in every part of the body, you have to increase the burden gradually. If you don't have any increasing burden, you won't have any hypertrophy. Now, that's talking about intramuscular. For extramuscular, like Prof. Cheng has mentioned, it is in the higher centers, and particularly your mental status. Now that's the point now they are discussing how mental process influence your endurance and so forth. Thank you.
Dr. Rahman, maybe anyone to share again? Dr. Hadia, Dr. Adrianta?
Maybe the latest I know is lactic acid doesn't cause the fatigue.
Yes.
So it's maybe the pH or the sodium potassium pump that is, disturbed during long exercise and you get fatigue. So it's not the lactic acid, because the lactic acid can be easily transformed to CO2 and water again. So if you have enough blood flow, then it's not the lactic acid per se, maybe. Is that right, Prof. Cheng?
The lactic acid also contribute, but there's obviously also the glycogen depletion. So I think for those going on a marathon race, they are asked to have a high carbohydrate meal, at least several days, if I remember correctly, to stock up on their glycogen level, so at least they can perform better in the long race. They have less fatigue. Yeah.
Yes.
The sports scientist should be able to tell us more.
Yeah. Because so many.
Also, we have rule of oxidative stress, because during muscle contraction, the blood flow to the muscle it will decrease, so it will cause the decrease of pH and also the increase of production of free radical. So the free radical also can cause damage to muscle cells, and also depend on the intensity of the exercise. If we do high intensity exercise, so maybe some muscle fiber will be tear up, and also the production of free radicals also increase. So it, and like Professor Cheng says that lactic acid maybe can also have role to cause DOMS. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So in here we got the maker lactic acid and sodium potassium.
Stress oxidative. Yeah.
Oxidative stress.
Yes.
Yeah. Lactic acid and oxidative stress. Okay, and Dr. Adrianta add about the potassium. I forget, Dr. Adrianta, that you said
sodium potassium pump for fatigue. Yeah, it will.
Sodium potassium pump.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For lactic acid, I'm still not sure. I think the latest is not the lactic acid per se, but maybe the pH, not the lactate. Yeah.
pH, yeah. Asaman.
Yes.
Titin, I have a Zoom session coming in soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll be happy to still take questions from students. They can contact me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
students or teachers listening, feel free to contact me. We can still continue to follow up. It was really nice meeting all of you and meeting my colleagues again.
Thank you.
Please share the slide, Professor.
Yes, yeah. I'm happy to share the slides. And maybe Dr. Titin, you can.
Yeah, I will share the slide after this.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. See you again.
Thank you, Prof. Cheng.
Oh,
Thank you. Right.
And Dr. Dani Rahmawati. So in here, so many
Thank you,
people from Fisiologi coming.
From all of Indonesia, yeah.
All of Indonesia.
From other countries.
Some from Philippines, right? You're saying?
Yes, from other countries. Because the Prof Cheng, yeah, when your name is mentioned in the Facebook or something, I think all people will follow you, will join to you with you.
Yeah, because very interesting topic, and the time is not enough.
Yes.
We have 2 hours, but still not enough.
I'm so lucky I can follow your
okay.
Dr. Sri Madringsih. Yeah, it's so lucky for me. I can get the more knowledge on muscle physiology from Prof Cheng. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. I think we have to do more cooperation between UNES and also UNER and also Undip and Malaysia University. So maybe we can do some teaching together, maybe.
Yeah.
And also research together. Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe we can take picture before we leave.
Yes, please. Yes. Yep. Page by page.
Pak Mustafa, could you help us to taking picture? How to do this? Okay. Pak Mus, where are you? So in here, Pak Mustafa. Wow. She look handsome now.
Everybody has to put the camera on.
Yeah, he helped us for this program. And Dr. Yeti, Dr. Tini, could you open your video? Dr. Adrianta, Pak Yusturia. Okay. Okay. One. Please open your video. Okay. Oh, have Dr. Sugiarto, Ibu Idiani Kurniadi. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Medawati. Open, Bima. Silahkan dibuka semua. Ini kenapa belum dibuka? Ada Sugiarto. 1, 2, 3. Slide 1. Slide 1 baru. Yang lainnya nggak kebuka. Kenapa ini? Belum mandi semua ya? Yang belum dibuka belum mandi. Oh, ini Teresa. Mirian aman. Mirian, can you open your video?
Yes, in a while, Dr. Titin. In a while.
Yeah. This one from Philippines, Dr. Cheng.
Okay.
Prof Cheng.
Hello, Miriam.
Also have a from Pakistan also.
Oh, right.
Yeah, from Singapore also have.
Nice.
And don't forget, after this program, we will have exercise physiology. Professor Cheng Hwee Ming from University of Taipei about exercise and dehydration, also hypothermia at 2 p.m.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your coming.
Okay.
Okay, I'm right here, Dr. Titin. How are you guys?
I'm good. Where is Miriam? Oh, yeah. Miriam.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
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 Thank you, Dr. Professors. Thank you.
Don't forget at 2 p.m. we'll have about exercise physiology. Terima kasih Dr. Adianta, Profesor Cheng.
Bye.
Terima kasih semua.
Ya, terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Mbak Titin.
Terima kasih Bu.
Terima kasih Mbak Tin. Sampai jumpa jam 2. Izin live.
Oke. Biar kotanya